Chitunudu, you will go down in history as the first man to become a FIFA accredited agent, Zambian. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Chit. It's despite the hot weather, it's good to be here. Yeah.
Talk to me. Chitunudu, how did your association with football start?
Zite, again, thank you very much for this opportunity. Football is, it touches the kids, the middle-aged and the old people, you know. And in a nation like Zambia, the sport is so big that, you know, even as you are growing, it's not difficult for you to miss it somehow in the home, on the streets, on TV, and, you know. As early as, I think about 10 years old, my older cousin, you know, I used to see him going to watch football, and he would go to the stadium, you know, he would come back, you know, the mood was, it was something that made him very happy, and he would play as well on the street. So we were young, sometimes, you know, when they go and play football and then they tell you don't follow us, but then somehow you end up following them, and then you join, you get kicked, and you know. But as early as 10, he took me to the Independence Stadium. I call it the original Independence, the original Heroes Stadium. That's what I call it. That was Zambia versus Angola, 1991. That game, I remember it, you know, the first cut is the deepest. I remember it even up to today. Charles Msonda scoring towards, I mean, it was the last minute, you know. And the joy, the mood, not only in the stadium, but even when we were coming back, it was something that I think it was like it was something that, it was a disease which I contracted.
Who would you say was your biggest hero? You talk about one of the greatest number 8 that many people have seen by the name of Charles Msonda. Does anybody eclipse what he did to you as a little boy?
Like I said, you know, I remember exactly, you know what, I was only 10 years old, but what I was seeing, you know, it was something out of this world. At that age, you know, you could see that, you know, the ball control, the passes, the way Kalushabwa, it's something that, you know, when you go on the streets, when you go and play as kids, you know, it's something you would want to imitate, because it was undescribable, you know.
Did you want to play the game, therefore?
Yes, I did. I think every kid it was, I mean, felt like, you know, they you know, they wanted to be professional footballers. From then on, you know, I went to watch the national team, the training. We went to watch you know, the Zambian clubs playing, you know, BP Top 8, Mosi Cup, Chibuku Cup, Faz Cup. Those were like, you know, it was their clubs playing, but then the stadium was like jam-packed, you know. It was like an international. So my interest began there.
We live in a football-crazy country, and therefore it just makes sense that you should have naturally fallen in love with the game.
Yeah.
But your path ended up being the academic route. So you went to Australia, went to study business management. Was the opportunity cost really football?
Okay, I would say, like most of my peers, you know, most parents were very interested in you taking the educational route. But then, you know, that interest for football was still there, and we play. Me, I think, and one or two students, we played semi-professional football there. It wasn't at that level, but then we still had that interest. But then we knew that, you know, at some point we should get involved into football development, and we can contribute something to it.
So you went out there, went to school, and had to come back home.
Yeah.
In terms of football, did your perspective about how you viewed the game change after you were done studying business management?
It didn't. I still had that interest. I think I even did some volunteer work. I think it was under, is it Paul Simcoco, one of the former general secretary, Paul Simcoco, in, I think that was somewhere the early towards mid 2000, and from then on we kept on encouraging each other, you know, that, you know, we can, with my colleague, I think he wouldn't take offense if I mention Lombe Mbalash. You know, we grew up in the same primary school, so we always, at every point, we always felt like we can always contribute something, you know, to Zambian football. It may not be as a footballer or a coach, but somehow, somewhere, there's always a place for us.
What kind of conversations did you have with now lawyer, now FAZESCO member, Lombe Mbalashi growing up?
I think, you know, when you are growing up, there are certain things that you see which you think could either be corrected or could be improved. You know, that's what our conversation usually a couple of times would meet. You know, we felt like, you know, this can be improved. I think that can be, and I think for me, I think he has done that. He has done tremendously well. Just, you know, to talk a little bit about me, is the one of the people who are behind, you know, what Nkana is today. I mean, Nkana was almost a forgotten, you know, such a big name, but then Nkana was almost a forgotten club, you know. But then, you know, through his innovation, you know, he managed to bring it, you know, up to where it is today. Yeah.
What were the gaps before you actually look at the game from afar and you look at it as something that's very attractive, but you're not inside, yet you're critiquing the system? What would you say were the gaps?
The gaps were quite. The gaps were quite a lot, especially when it comes to. I would say, though it's not something that I touched, but I would say like income generating for the clubs, the national team, for it somehow to attract better sponsors. You know, it was. It's like Zambia had a very good crop of players. They had a good name on the map of Africa, but then we were not really benefiting as much as we were supposed to.
What was your hypothesis for you to feel like that?
You know, I think there's a time when we went to visit the national team when they were in camp. I think it was early 2000s. But then, you know, the way they were dressed, where they were camped, you know, things like that. You know, I thought, you know, there should come a couple of people who can improve that, you know, because Zambia, like I was saying, Zambia had a good crop of hard-working players, very skillful, very talented, but then I think they could be treated better. There could be, you know, a better environment for them and better opportunities for them. That's what we felt.
Tell me something. You know all too well that some of the handlers of Zambian football, throughout the times, are some of the best minds that the country has ever had. Some have held very top positions in the corporate world. How come your generation began to think that these people are doing a shoddy job, so to speak?
Yeah, because everything was sort of like going on the downstream. At some point we saw in Ghana, Mighty Mfulira Wanderers, they started to struggle. But then we all knew too well that at some point, these were our flag carriers for the nation. But then physically we could see that now things are not going okay, and well, we stand to be corrected, but it's like nobody really had the time to look at that, the business sense of football. It's like everybody was politicking at first. That's my opinion. See, nobody was looking at, okay, how do I give myself to a team like Mufulira Wanderers or Nkana? How do I contribute to Zambian football? Whether, it's managing players, facilitating transfers, or something away from this, football, politicking, fights, fuzz, things like that. Who can contribute to the real contribution to football, to open themselves up and say, okay, you know what, I think there's this area that we need to take care of,
Frankly speaking, you're a man, because of your background and education, who knows all too well that football is a populist sport, and anything populist will attract politics. And people will fight to be, number one, in positions, number two, to be associated with the game. Doesn't it make sense, therefore, that people actually compete very hard to actually get involved in football, in the political realm?
Yes, the individuals also who, you can't run away from the fact that as an individual, we've got our own motives, ambitions, and dreams. Some, they have used football for their own, maybe political, at governance level, in terms of the government. They have used football to as a stepping stone. Some, they've genuinely come and said, you know what, I want to offer myself. Some, so because football is like the hub of all these things. That is where you have a lot of politics, and because of that, there will always be confusion. And it's not just at national level, but it's if you look at football, wrangles like they're everywhere because of this same. Some it's business interests, some it's a lot of things,
Are you trying to suggest that football is a victim of opportunists and people who just want to rob it? Has football been robbed, therefore?
In a way, yes. Because if you read the literature that is there in magazines, what has gone on with former players, you discover that sometimes there's an invisible hand to certain things. Some things which we saw were not just, it wasn't just because they happened. I would give an example like Diego Maradona, who got entangled himself in drugs and everything. But there were all sorts of hands which were involved. And it's because he was involved in football, which attracts thousands of people. Football, it's a powerful force. It's hugely followed. There's a lot of money that is poured in there. there's issues of match fixing, and sometimes, unfortunately, some people who have been involved or were involved, there are higher powers that, or invisible hands that are involved. That's how powerful football is.
I want you to bring it home a bit. The example of Diego Armando Maradona is neat. Maybe we can throw in George Best for,
Yes.
or we can, but let's bring it home. From where you stand, and as a young man who wanted to get involved in football, do you feel that Zambian football was shortchanged and it was seemingly robbed and never achieved the real potential that it could?
Well, I think it was, but things are changing now. There are a couple of individuals who have come up who want to sort of like clean up the sports. I would give an example like Chimonya Mwitwa, Linus Chalwe. These are genuine guys who are trying to bring sanity, to clean up the sport so that it should be what it is. It should maximize its potential without any,
Did you ever think that football was dirty? It was not clean. I asked that question because you talk about Chimunya Mwetwa, who is now sensitizing people against the dangers of match fixing. He was involved, or he was a victim of people who do these things. Did you grow up feeling you're watching the national team or the Nkanas, the Power Dynamos, that maybe the referees could have sold this game, that
Yes.
player is all of a sudden quote unquote underperforming and things like that?
No, you're right. Not only that, but I would give an example. When I think I was 17 years old, and then there were, I think, Midlands trials for Lusaka-based Midlands trials, like under 17. I was 16 years old, but then the coach said, "You're too young. Come back maybe after maybe 4 or 5 years." So it's only now, Zite, when you can say there is a genuine under 17. Maybe 1 or 2 discrepancies, but you and me know there is a tremendous improvement.
Did that influence you saying, I'm 16, I'm being denied playing in under 17.
Yeah,
I'm out, I'm going to school.
So those are the issues which more or less we had the heart, but they discouraged us, because here you are, you have gone for the under 17. This is what I was talking about when I say you've gone for trials under 17 and you are 16 years old. So you would think, I'm 16, I'm supposed to play. But somehow you're told come back after now 4 or 5 years from now. You say, but I'll be 2021. What? Now this is a renowned coach. This is not a small coach who's telling you. This is a coach who is in the national setup. He's a former Zambia international. So those things got to us to think like, okay.
What did your parents or your guardians feel when you were sent back home and you needed to explain to them that you needed to go back when you were 21 to the under 17 team?
Okay, that time we never really, most of the time, like, it was friends, cousins, whom that time I think they didn't even know I had gone for trials or anything. They didn't even know. But those are some of the things which started to, and drug abuse itself, it was very rampant. Because when we were young, we actually saw senior national team players, they were on drugs. We actually saw it, them taking drugs. But now things are beginning to change. It's very things are beginning to change in terms of the age cap. There's the MRI scans, the coaches also, they're trying as much as possible to regulate this, to have the right age because of the sanctions that come and everything. They have also understand the not the consequences, but they understand how it impedes development in terms of the players' maturity and growth. Because if you put a 23-year-old in the under 17, and then you are saying we have a future,
But what has really changed in your view? To the extent I'm sure that you wish you were playing football in this generation.
I think the coming of MRI scans, that never used to happen. One. Secondly, there is also the schools which are the coaches are also more like in touch with the schools where when there's a schools tournament, they are in touch with those schools to say, okay, when did this guy start his education? So they are trying. I'm not saying it's 100%, but you can see that the coaches, the technical committee, even the clubs, they understand and they are really trying their best, to curb the vice.
Let's fast forward a bit. In the year 2012, you became a FIFA accredited agent, first Zambian to achieve that. What was your biggest motivation to do that?
I think two things. Somebody, when I saw the advert, I think in the papers, I think I went to FAS that time. No, in fact, 2 years earlier than 2012. I think 2 years. I think somebody said, this exam it's very difficult. Nobody passes this exam. And I said, okay. And I gave my first attempt. It didn't work out. The second, it didn't work out. It's only the third time that's when it worked out. That was the first motivation. The second one was, we saw how players were being managed. There was no that kind of like the players they were depending upon just some club seeing them. There was nobody who could market, who could say, okay, let's make YouTube clips, let's send them here, let's talk to. There was nobody who could really represent and market the players. That is the part which I think I was pushed me, to attempt to become a player agent.
So you finally became a player agent. What was the state of the Zambian game and regards the business of buying and selling of players?
No, lucky enough, I think that year Zambia won the Africa Cup. So I got so many connections through that victory, because now the focus was on Zambia and everybody thought that from Zambia you can get a good player. From Zambia they have quality. From Zambia this is a place where football is improving, and scoring the marks. So it happened at a very good time.
So we win AFCON. Some players were already in Europe. Some were playing locally.
Yeah.
What was the biggest issue? When you walked in, your biggest target, was it to move the ones playing locally to go abroad, or get the ones abroad to bigger places?
I think the challenge was that I think when I got that certificate, it's like that's when I started to learn how this thing actually works. So it wasn't like you attend a course or some training, then up to that the issue was that I passed an exam, but then the practicality of the work was something else, which you had to take time and understand the dynamics of how this thing works. And again, football is always football. There are politics everywhere. Football is an emotional game, and sometimes it's something which I can say, for a lack of a better term, it's a sophisticated tool. So at whatever area you are at, whether you are a referee, player agent, you're a coach, you experience the challenges in your own in a different form.
What was the biggest? Now, all of a sudden, you're competing with international agents who perhaps were coming to this country already, getting Zambian players, taking them out there.
Yes.
You must have jumped into a lake of fire. Did it feel like that?
It's when I first passed the exam, it felt like that. Until I think we had a chat with the former first president, Kalushabwali, and he said, just relax and learn.
I'm sure you're very enthusiastic. You sounded like the former first president, who's of course somebody with a huge international image and played the game and captained the national team for a long time, didn't help you to get a shortcut and get this thing moving.
No, because look, it was it's I was being welcomed, so to say, to a specific field of football itself. So him being somebody who has, I can say, has experienced, he has worked, he had an agent. He was a footballer, he was a coach, he was an administrator, he was seeing things in a broader perspective.
What would you say is the most valuable advice that he gave you?
I think just that, to say, with anything that you start, be willing to learn and have patience. And from there, you know what to do at every point, because at almost every day, you are learning.
Did tell me from your hearts of hearts, did that sound ridiculous? Because you had the person probably who could pick up the phone and link you up to people maybe at PSV Eindhoven,
Yeah.
Club America where he played.
Yeah.
And many people, he is the man who needed very little introduction.
Yes, but also,
Was it something that was discomforting that he didn't open those doors for you and say, look, go in, this is Chitunudu, is Zambian, please help him get things done?
I think, in every area of life, when, like I was saying, be willing to learn and have patience. With that will come trust. It's very difficult because if someone has got a relationship with the chairman for PSV, you don't want to just introduce somebody without knowing the background, knowing the person whom you are taking there very well. You need to start from somewhere. You need to build up that trust. You need to build up the work. Then you can say, okay, because those people, they've built a relationship with, for example, the sporting director of PSV, the chairman of Club America. They have built a relationship for 20 years. You don't want somebody, yes, he has passed an exam, Chitunudu, You introduce, and then after 3 months, you hear this.
So, the problem right there was that when you passed that exam, you didn't have too many friends in football, too many movers and shakers. Is that what you're trying to say?
Okay, I was lucky maybe because I was young. Okay, I was lucky that I had a lot of support from a number of people. Yes, it's normal to have an achievement threaten something or threaten somebody. But I think I received quite a number of people support me.
Let's talk about some of the local transfers that you did. What were some of the notable ones, and what did these clubs really want, and how did it feel to pin down your first transfer with that certificate in your file?
Okay, there are a number of local transfers, local movements which I did just to give myself a feel and of how things go. But I think the first international transfer in 2013 involving Pukamlenga Power Dynamos and Sundowns was the first international transfer, then followed by I think 2 months later Davis Mwape to the club where Water Warrior is now in Egypt. Then the others we had, I think a Malawian go to a team in South Africa. The others they were not involving Zambian players. And then a couple of them, you had partners who say, okay, we can work the two of us on this. Very interesting, because at every, you learn something, and it's...
So, Mukoka Mlenga, let's give that one an example. One of the hottest properties, 2012-2013, that was in the country. How easy was it to, number one, get him to work with you, seeing that you didn't make a CV to say, listen, I've taken people here and there. What did you need to do to convince Mukoka Mlenga that, look, we can actually work together and I can be good for your career?
I think that time first of all, I had a relationship with Mamelodi Sundowns. I struck a relationship with them. And we began to work with them from the time Ghana came to Levi Mwanawasa in 2012. I think it was the first international game at Levi where Chris Katongo scored. That was the first time the scouting team, they came to Levi Mwanawasa. We sat with them. They were trying to, but I mean, the 2012 was a star-studded team. They had already, the FIFA agents tied most of the players, like you mentioned. They were already playing in Europe, in South Africa. So they were just trying to now see, okay, which player can we start to look at on a long term. So that's how, I said, there's this boy who plays for Power Dynamos. He's young, I think he's got the potential, he's got that style of South African kind of style of football. And from then, that is how come I would give them updates for almost like a year. I would give them updates, videos of him playing. Then I think he got called up to the Nelson Mandela, I think, challenge, which we played in South Africa. Then they saw him there. Then it was a team which showed consistent. One of the teams in Europe, they felt like he was too small for, is it Danish or German Bundesliga? They felt he was too small for that kind of league. So everything started to center on the Sundowns move, because these others, they were just inquiries. you know. So at the end of it, that is how come, you know, we settled for a move at Mamelodi Sundowns.
Tell me something. We win the Africa Cup of Nations and most of our players are playing in Europe. And the honest truth is that it was probably supposed to be a light bulb moment where our teams and players were going to get bigger contracts. Did we really benefit from Zambia winning the 2012 in terms of getting our players out there?
I think I would say we did, in the sense that that current team, when those players went back to their clubs, their profiles were raised. And then going forward, you know, a victory will always, that name that Zambia has won the Africa Cup, it would never, we may not see it in terms of, okay, the players, which players went to Europe and what, but even 4 years later or even 10 years later, if a player goes for trials, like in Europe, for example, they'll say at least this guy comes from a country where their country once won the Africa Cup.
Is that a big issue when transferring players?
I mean, it adds something.
Let me ask you about Mkuka Mlenga. So you said Mamelodi Sundowns were on the radar for more than a year. So therefore, I put the question, is it possible for clubs to fall in love at first sight with the experience? That they see a player one game or just a couple of minutes and say, we are going to get this player?
Yes, I think I've noticed that is how professional clubs, they don't just buy a player and commit to a player on impulse because they've just seen him and then next week they want to. It's like these clubs, the high profile clubs in abroad, they can monitor a player for 1 year. They want to monitor his consistency. They want to see that, okay, he's playing week in, week out. They are in liaison with the technical bench. We are looking for an attacking midfielder. This is what we need. This is our kind of play. Does he fit in? They'll compare the videos of where he's playing and can he come and fit. There's a lot that is involved.
Did you ever find yourself in this situation, therefore, where you're trying to market a player, you look at a player, say he's got the talent, but you're trying to market him at a club where the style of play is actually different, so to speak?
Yes, and I understood that that is how football is. Even in Zambia, there are players whom we've said, this is a fantastic talent, you know, he's fantastic talent. But then when you send his profile, when you present him to, they'll tell you, no, this is not a high profile player. Why? Because of like, you know, he can't, they'll give you the technical reports of why they don't think that. And when you look at it, you'll say, but
what are some of the arguments? Because one will argue and say we don't have too many Zambian players in Europe, for example, or in too many big teams that are hitting big. What are some of the issues that you feel we have that we need to deal with?
I think we also of course we need to stick to our game, what we know. We need to stick to what makes us get the result and what makes us comfortable. But
by way of definition, what would you say? What do we know?
I think the type of Zambian football is, you know, strong in technical ability. It's a a passing game, played on the ground. I think that's what the natural, typical Zambian player, I mean, that's what we have known, you know, good fast wingers. But if you go to certain leagues, like I would give an example. If you go to certain leagues like the Bundesliga, they focus so much on physical fitness. Now, interestingly, when you look at Fortson Kabole, former Nchanga Rangers coach, is German trained. Now, his philosophy was more on the German side. So even the players who he produced, like Moses Chone and Andrew Sinkala, these are players that I would say they were educated the German style. So when they went to play when they went for trials in Germany, it wasn't an issue, because those guys, their kind of play was direct, forceful, physical fitness. You know, that is how they knew how to play. You know, so with that aspect, I think it shows you how football moves.
Tell me something, and it's good you've mentioned something called coaches. Explain to me why, for example, are player agents only known for wanting to ship players and not coaching staff to other leagues, other countries? What is the situation in Zambia?
Maybe we haven't reached that. We haven't.
Has it ever crossed your mind, I can see Coach X looks good, take him to this country?
Mm-hmm. No, we are
propose him to a different team?
We are getting there. We are slowly getting there, and we can see coaches like Ona Janza, Wedson Nyirenda. We are winning the trust of the international clubs. So we are getting there.
So, can we dream like this? Zambian coach or African coach crossing a sea or an ocean to actually go and coach. You've said that for players, Fortson Kabole, German trained, he produced a lot of players that were likable by German standards. What about the coaching? What then should be our philosophy? Because we can choose from the Spanish, English, Italian, Germany, and you can name the whole shebang.
Well, it's okay. Football is dynamic. I wouldn't say, like I was saying, I wouldn't say there is the right way to play football. Football is dynamic, and if you're at a tournament, you see how the Arabs sometimes they are very careful at defense. That's the way they play football. We respect them for that. Then
what should be our approach? Because if you say football is dynamic, then I'll ask for the common denominator, because we are then developing players. But how do we make this player sellable? Germany, Italy, Spain, England, and any other place that we might want to. How do we train these kids therefore?
I think we must try as much as possible to make a player an all-rounder. He must be the complete football player. Why I say that? If you look at the old traditional, if you are a number two, you are a number two. Your job ends at a certain, anything extra than that, to dribble, to score, it's like it's alien to you. That time, if you're a number three, you are just. But then football is changing. You need to be good in attack. You need to be good in defense. Once you do that, then you'll find that it's very easy for you to fit in any league, because they'll say, okay, here is defensive style we play. For example, you will fit in defense. Here, this is how we play our football. You already know what kind of.
How do you assess our development structures? Is it something that we are doing well at, or it's an emergency that needs to be dealt with like yesterday?
I think let me also take this opportunity to commend Lyson Zulu at the technical director. He's put in a lot of work, and there are a lot of programs, the under 16 league, you know, the community programs, even the under 17, the way I think it takes a lot of hard work, and he's spearheading everything, I think, in the right direction. And the results we may not see, maybe he will not even be there. We may not see them maybe like in 3 years' time at national team level, but even if they are not there, but they have set the foundation and the base.
Let's talk about these players. Some of them we've managed to get them deals outside the country, but again, their social life and their mannerisms become a stumbling block. What do agents do about that?
You know, there is what you can do as an agent and what you can't do. Why I say so is there are certain players who have grown up with certain things, and it's at a certain age, it is very, very difficult for you to, as an individual, to change the mentality of or certain habits that these players are used to. It's not something that you can change. You can advise. You can sit down and talk about it. Some changes can be made, but it's very difficult.
What are some of the challenges? Because when you're the agent, you assume to be the de facto manager, and then if the player is bopping at 2 in the morning, super drunk, or doing all kinds of things that ultimately affect the performance.
Yes, and you know, an adult, if he wants to be out there up to 2 a.m. He has been doing that when he was earning 6,000 kwacha, and now that he is earning $10,000 a week, it even becomes more difficult to put him to say, because human nature, he needs to feel that he's making the money. So it's very, very difficult.
Are such players bad for business?
Well, I wouldn't say they are bad for business, but when it comes to business, it's what the player does on the pitch that will sell.
Ultimately, I'm just thinking, a lot of players have been shipped back to this country, and people always ask, who's managing these players? Who's handling these players? Can someone talk to these players? So you've got a strategic relationship with Club X. You take a player to them, he starts off well, but the social habits begin to affect his performance on the pitch. Does that have a bad check mark on Chit, Chitunudu, whoever brought this player to that club?
No, it doesn't, because the clubs also, they understand this problem. The clubs understand this problem, and every club has this problem. There are always 2-3 guys. I mean, even Manchester United, they've obviously encountered, they obviously have such kind of individuals, you know. They'll always be there, and even when an individual comes, they know you've done your part. Even them, for them to buy that player, they've something they have seen over time, which can be useful to them. You know?
Tell me something. This football business, some people have said that it's a den where mafias thrive. What's your position on that? Do you need to become a mafia to be successful in this business?
No, mafias will always appear where there is power and money. You know, And the football is a powerful force. And football attracts a lot of money. A lot of money is poured into football. Internationally, there is a lot of money involved. So you cannot avoid either the invisible hands, the illegal hands. You cannot avoid that.
How important is it to have strategic relationships, say, with a national team coach, a coach of a club? What kind of relationships do agents have with these people?
Most of the coaches, they work with agents because they trust the quality that they look for. They trust that this agent usually gives me very good quality players. That is what the relationship is all about.
From a Zambian perspective, for you to actually move a player to point A to point B, and you've talked about the technical report, that for instance, the club that you're targeting will have 1, 2, 3, 4 concerns. Do you go and have conversations with the coaches and say, look, coach, club XYZ is saying they're interested in this player, but this part needs to be fixed?
Yes, and most Zambian coaches, they are very educated. They really have the football education, and they are able to, most of them are even able to tell where a player can fit in and where he can't.
With that said, there is this suspicion that agents would slip a brown envelope under the table just to ensure that certain things get done. They'll talk about corruption, and as you've said, mafias pop up where there's power and money. How big is the problem on a scale to 1 to 10 in this country?
You cannot avoid it. Anywhere in the world, it's something that exists. I wouldn't be able to say from 1 to 10 what it is, but it exists.
Is it a challenge?
It depends on which side you are, but it's
from where you stand.
It is, because then you are working against certain ethics. So it becomes a challenge.
Is it easy to still be a good Christian and involve yourself in certain careers like this one? Like you say, it's hard to follow certain ethics.
It's difficult, yes. It's just like a politician. What he's eyeing is power and the access to money. So there are a lot of things involved. So it will always be difficult to be a good Christian.
Tell me something. If you had the power and the magic wand, what are some of the agent things you'd love to see change in Zambian football?
Well, I think the scouting net for the age group teams and the national team itself, especially up to the under 23, has to be cast a lot wider, in the rural areas. And we would like also, I think, under the technical directorate also, they're trying to regulate the way an academy is supposed to run, because that's where the key is. The academies also need to be supervised, because that's where the foundation is. Imagine if you're teaching kids the wrong thing at your academy in your village, only for them to be introduced to the correct thing when they are 17, then it has defeated the whole purpose. So the academies, I know they are springing up, but they need to be supervised. The way they conduct their training, the principles of the academy, the training routine, a lot of things, they need to be supervised, you know, by the relevant authorities at FAS.
If the national team, so to speak, is not very competitive at the international scene, does that affect the business that you do?
It does, then, because then the national team is not on the map. Then people, because if you and me, if we hear that there is a Brazilian player coming, at the back of our heads we think he's a very, very good player because of where he's coming from. Brazil is it's known for, you know, it's known for fantastic football. That's what it's known for. So it helps even to build up the profile and the pedigree of the player.
We have seen an influx of foreign-based players in Zambia. I'm sure you've been involved in some of the transfers, some foreign players that have come into Zambia. What are the current prospects in the Zambian market? A bait talk of regulation.
I think on that one we need to cross the bridge when we reach there. I think we still need the regulation, yes, will come, but we still need to continue to raise the profile of the Zambian league. We still need to be at the CAF semi-final, group stages, which was unheard of a decade ago or so. We still need to improve. So when that, I would say when we reach a point whereby, okay, Zambian football has stabilized now, Zambian a club now, it's normal for us to reach the finals of the club, then we can say, okay, these guys have raised the profile, now can we begin to regulate?
It's too early for talk to start controlling the number of foreigners. But some people will say that, no. We've got too many not so good foreigners coming into our league.
Yes, but...
and you want to treat it like it's business as usual.
No, but the coaches are there to... They are the ones that assess. They have the technical committee. There are coaches whom they say, for example, I don't have a left back in the Zambian. There is no Zambian left back whom I can. So he gets a guy from, for example, from Tanzania, and that guy is man of the match maybe twice in the CAF Champions League. He needs the result. The club needs the result. You know, I mean, then the problem if the guy who has come is below average or is at the same level at the Zambian and he's been signed on, then there's a problem with the coach.
Is there room for patriotism in your line of business? Is your biggest priority selling Zambian players and taking them high?
Well, there's also the business side and the patriotism side.
Which one is more profitable?
But I mean, if you're talking about profits, the best product is the one which is more profitable. So it can be a Zambian, it can be... So you don't look at the nationality.
What next for Chitunudu? Record-breaking achievement of being the first FIFA agent registered by FIFA. What would you say has been your greatest lesson in this journey so far?
I would say the greatest lesson is, you know, football, like Sepp Blatter says, football is the school of life. In football, have to learn to keep relationships with people, because like the way the ball is, what goes around, it comes around. What you think you are avoiding, you end up meeting it on the other side. So in football, it's about keeping relationships.
What's the future of the Zambian player and its game?
I think it's very bright. We've seen the age group teams do very well, qualifying to the AFCON, qualifying to winning the COSAFA Cup recently at under 17 level, and we hope there will be continuity in what is being done, especially under the technical directorate.
Chitunudu, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, I appreciate it.